Oh, I think for me, it's like I look at myself in the mirror and say, am I investing as much time as I should to find a community?
Hmm.
Because sometimes when I get home from work, I just want to doom scroll, just cook dinner and just rot and not do anything. But then I see people on like Instagram stories or Snapchat and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're playing pickleball or we did a
Nice.
sunset walk on the beach." And I'm just like, "Oh, that's so nice. Maybe tomorrow." And then I'm back in my same
Hmm.
cycle.
There's a different kind of sickness that comes from not seeing people in the flesh. We spent years locked in, logged on, doom scrolling through a world that doesn't exist. But out there, in pubs, in living rooms, on mountaintops, at knitting circles, people are still finding each other. This is Real Meat. I'm your host, Brian Feaster. Let's go meet someone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Real Meat podcast, where we talk to community builders around the world about what they are doing in terms of supporting or empowering people to connect in person. So today we have our guest, Ashley, and she is a reporter in the Florida area. And Ashley, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself just so that they know who you are and where you're coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian, for having me on. I'm honored to be here. I was born and raised in Florida in a very small town called Lake Placid. I knew I wanted to do something that could help and connect with people. And I feel like you can choose a ton of careers by doing that. You could be a doctor, you could be a teacher, but for some odd reason, I wanted to try to tackle the journalism route, and that's what I did. So I went to school at Arizona State University, go Devils. I got my bachelor's in sports, and I got my master's in mass communication. And I miss Florida so much that I decided to come back. I did my first contract in Tallahassee, Florida, and then I am now here in Orlando as a multimedia journalist.
Very, very cool. So, not all of my guests, just a caveat for all of my listeners, not all of my guests are necessarily people I've known a long time. Ashley and I met recently. So, we're going to learn about Ashley together, those of you who are listening along with me. But thanks for joining us. And I think what I, the way I think of this is that inspiring people to connect in person is just a really good way of helping people. Because I think for me, I spent a lot of years, I'm a software engineer by trade. I lead engineering teams and I have for many years now. I think I've led teams for 15 years or more. And in that context, it's easy to get stuck behind a computer screen and not really and get out into the world and see people in person. So, Ashley, what is it that made you decide that finding a reason to get out into the community and connect in person with people was so important that you decided to take that career trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was younger where my family and I always ate dinner at the dinner table. No matter how late a sporting event was or if my dad was working, my father was a fireman at the time, excuse me, but we always found time to sit at the dinner table and we always plugged our phones out in the kitchen no matter what. Once it hit 9 o'clock, phones were out in the kitchen and we just had family time together. So
Nice.
being even like as a reporter, you're behind a computer screen researching, looking at court documents, looking at meeting agendas and stuff. And then whenever you see that person for an interview, you kind of remember them as, how do I put this? You remember them as like looking at the court documents because you're interviewing this person to be your expert. So I think just getting out in the community has helped me a bunch, especially with such a digital age that we are in. I feel like a lot of people don't know how to communicate anymore because we're so used to just doing this. Even at restaurants, I see people just like this on their phones.
Yeah,
And I'm
looking
just
at their
like,
phone.
you guys are at a nice restaurant. You guys are eating good food, great company. So I think just being able to just put it down and also just being in the moment, that has been helping me to just get out in the community and just not being like stuck in that digital like aspect of things and everything.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, obviously I understand it. It's like when your job is like writing code, that's very much a factor. So I can relate to that in terms of just being kind of stuck in that digital world. And There are whole communities online, and I'm also grateful for those. Like those communities, sometimes they can be a good sustaining factor in life if you're for some reason less able to get out of the house and that sort of thing. But yeah, my goal, or one of the things I want to do by featuring people's stories, is to just help people get an idea of the really wide range of things that are out there in person. So what, as a reporter, as somebody who gets out into the community in person, what are some of the most interesting things that you have come across in terms of opportunities to connect in person? Because you're there with people. We talk about restaurants, we talk about eating together, which are, I think, beautiful ways of connecting. Is there anything else that you have found that was super interesting in your area, that in your travels and studies as a journalist?
Yeah, I know when I was in Tallahassee, we did this thing called like neighborhood reporting, and I was the one person to report on a one area. And I remember I would sit down at a coffee shop and just, like go on my laptop, look for stories and stuff. And I remember people would come up to me because they would recognize me and say, "Hey, are you Ashley Engle, like the neighborhood reporter?" I was like, "Yeah, I am." They're like, "I have a story for you. Do you mind if I sit down and chat with you?" And that's where I got a lot of my story ideas, just sitting down and just like waiting for someone to come up. Now, sometimes it didn't happen all the time because I know people are busy, but
Sure,
that's one
sure.
way. But there is a lot of people who either run or they play pickleball. I'm
Hmm.
not a runner, so I decided to learn how to play some pickleball.
Nice.
So even too, it's like I'm not walking around telling people, "Oh yeah, I'm a reporter." People will ask me and say, "Do I recognize you from somewhere?" And then I'll
Sure.
say, "You probably saw me on TV a couple times. Like I'm on this news channel." They're like, "Oh yeah, like we watch you." And then they'll tell
Hmm.
me something that's going on, let's say their HOA or like something with their water bill or like, a new ordinance that's coming out that they have questions
Hmm.
about. So I think just being able to relate, because at the end of the day, reporter is my job. It's not who I am as a person. Like I'm Ashley as a person. I'm a person that loves to get active. I'm a person that loves to get to know people and connect with them and put a smile on their face and help them. But I think too, it's like when we realize that, we're all people and what we do as a trade is just an aspect, kind of like an addition to who we are and not
Hmm.
100% who we are. I feel like we can definitely get out there and connect with people just as people because we're people. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So this will come a little bit perhaps out of left field. I used to spend time in the Orlando area. It's been quite a few years now, but there was a period in my life, maybe about 10 years, where I would spend maybe 3 weeks there every year. So I, in that area, there's two communities that kind of jump out at me in my memory of the area. One is, are you familiar with a tiny little area called Dunedin down there on the Gulf? Is that not? No, okay.
ringing
So
a bell now.
Dunedin is near Clearwater.
Okay.
So you're okay. That's right.
That's
I
Tampa
did
area.
this. Yes, I did that. I did that thing of, so I like people confuse Orlando and Tampa area, and that was my mistake. But anyway, all that being said, so it's more toward the Tampa area, but there's a really cool little community down there. They are sort of Irish oriented, I guess I would say, like little pub and stuff like that. Anyway, cool. I cut out. Okay, and so another question I had, something that comes to my mind is, as someone who spends a lot of time in the community, Ashley, I think you have a unique view on the time and energy it takes to build community and to do that sort of thing. I think that you probably spend a lot of time featuring the stories of people's labor because they put in a lot of work and time and heart into creating community, and it can sometimes be somewhat a thankless effort in the sense that it takes a lot of work and you don't necessarily make a ton of money doing it all the time. What are some of the things that you've learned from people who are out there building communities, and that you've seen kind of in terms of what people's sacrifice looks like, and how much they try to go out of their way to build community?
I think building community definitely takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm even thinking as a reporter, I have, from the 6 months I've been in Orlando, I have a lot of contacts of like city commissioners and like county commissioners and, like activists and everything in the community. But on a personal note, I have like two friends in Orlando. Well, not counting my husband, like he has to be my friend. But it's just like, as in my career, I strive to build those connections in order to get the story. But on a personal level, and I'm a social butterfly, it's been really hard to try to find community when, as a career, I'm trying to find community for my job and to getting the
Yeah.
story and like putting it on the
Yeah.
5 o'clock news. So,
Yep.
in
Yep.
both aspects, yes, it took time and also building trust as well takes time as well as a reporter, but it doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice. It means being vulnerable, being honest, and also just being an ear to hear. My mom always told me that the good Lord gave us two ears and one mouth for a reason. So, just listening to those in your community and just hearing their stories, because, like I said before, we have so much in common with one another than we do not in common. So, it does take time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting. What are your thoughts on? So I have this theory, and part of what got me interested in the in-person aspect of things. I've been an event organizer in the past. I started a whole nonprofit organization that we never quite got legally classified that way, but we would have a big performance and we had all these performing artists who would attend. So that part I'm familiar with, but especially after COVID for me, I felt like it was such a really stark picture of the fact that humans really just need in-person connection. And while there's legitimate reasons for having people avoiding spreading sickness, which is fine, there's a different kind of sickness that comes from not seeing people in the flesh, in my opinion. And so, all that being said, that's kind of what got me started on my company, which is like kind of an events platform that helps people to connect and find, in-person connection. And when you talk about Orlando and having moved there and still feeling like you haven't really found that connection, what are your thoughts around this? My theory is, and the reason that I kind of started my company is that over time, finding these like event listings of opportunities to connect, it seems to be more difficult as time goes on rather than easier. Because it's like, oh, there's 20 event platforms and you got to go check all of them and who has time to do that. So tell me a little bit more about your experience there just with the struggle aspect of finding community and where you've been for 6 months.
Yeah. I think for me, it was also because I just moved and then I also got married within the six
Yep.
months of moving here. And then now it's like
Yep.
that whole season two.
Yep.
Since then, my husband and I found a church. We're both in small groups. My
Hmm.
coworkers who I work with, we hang out all the time. So I think for me, it's like I look at myself in the mirror and say, am I investing as much time as I should to find a community?
Hmm.
Because sometimes when I get home from work, I just want to doom scroll, just cook dinner and just rot and not do anything. But then I see people on like Instagram stories or Snapchat and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're playing pickleball or we did
Nice.
a sunset walk on the beach." And I'm just like, "Oh, that's so nice. Maybe tomorrow." And then I'm back in my
Hmm.
same cycle. So I think it's
Sure.
it's definitely a two-way street. You get in what you put out of it if you do the effort and putting yourself out there, making plans with people and saying, "Hey, who wants to go get a coffee on Saturday?"
Hmm.
Or, "Hey, who
Hmm.
wants to come over and I know Dancing with the Stars just ended. Who wants to have a
Hmm.
Dancing with the Stars marathon?" Or, "Oh, hey, the U.S. men's hockey team versus Canada. Who wants to come over at 8 o'clock in the morning and watch that?" So it's just things like that where if you put yourself out there, you'll get that aspect in return. And as my husband and I have gotten like settled in Orlando, we have been able to say, okay, let's branch ourselves out a little bit. Let's not be so much an introvert. Let's start making new friends. It's not going to hurt us. But I definitely do agree that it is harder nowadays because we're so attached to that digital age, like you said, and we're so trapped into being comfortable instead of getting out of our comfort zone whenever it comes to building those relationships.
Yeah, that's a really good one that I don't know that I think about. There's so many dimensions to this problem or so many layers to it, I guess. But you're right. I think like there really is something about the risk in connecting with people, and the fact that the digital world offers that kind of risk-free version, sort of always connected to whoever you're connected to on social media. There's this sort of, as time marches on, you eventually have been on, it's like I was on Facebook for not 20 years. How long was I on? It's like 15, 17 years before I deleted my Facebook account. And, you accumulate all these people who are connected to you there. And what happens is it's like, well, if I jump into this world, there's like hundreds of people that I know that are sort of all there interacting, even if it's very, very superficial, very many to one relationship. We talk about that in programming. It's the idea of like, well, there's one post and there's 70 people talking on it, right? So it's not really a chance to connect in a close way with just one person at a time or anything like that. But yeah, so that's interesting though. I hadn't thought about that lately, the idea that convenience is really kind of the enemy here if you're really wanting to be more connected. So what are some other ways do you think that you are trying to push back against that sense of just being lulled into convenience and sort of, scrolling is a good example of it, but other thoughts around that?
I think for me it's like getting used to trying new things. And I love
Hmm.
adventures, but also just people who I know. Like if my husband tells me, "Hey, we're going to go try out this beach that's like 4 hours away." Count me in. I'll bring my book, my
Nice.
sunscreen, and my Spindrift soda with me, okay? So I'm in my mid 20s and I have a lot more life to live. And one of the things I'm doing is trying new things. For example, I'm not a sushi person. One of my friends I met in Orlando asked me, "Hey, do you want to grab sushi at this place?" I said yes, even though I'm not a big fan of sushi, but hey, maybe I can do that. But it's just doing things like that where it's what do you have to
Hmm.
lose? Try something new. You only live this life once and you connect with people once. And I feel like I'm a huge believer in Christ where I believe that he puts people in your life for a season for a reason, and maybe it's for you to make them happy or do something for them or be a friend for them, or you would need that person in your life and you don't even know. Like maybe you're about to go through a season that you need people, you need that community. And I really do
Hmm.
believe that the Lord puts people in our life for a reason. Maybe not for a long time, maybe it is for a long time, but why would you miss that opportunity just to be comfortable? And I'm talking to myself too. I need to take my own advice because sometimes I'm like, doom scrolling sounds nice. My couch sounds really nice, but that opportunity is always cool too, of what you can get out of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it comes down to, I have this theory. This is interesting because you took this a place where not everybody does, but I think about this fairly often. My thinking is that people can get stuck at any mental age. I've met people who are stuck at the mental age of 5, 20, 30, 40, 60, 80. Like you can stop growing at any point. And I think that, like, similar to what you're saying about the putting yourself out there and taking risk, being willing to be uncomfortable, I think that's part of the hope, is that we grow as people, as humans, and in doing so, it requires never giving in to that temptation to just really just numb out. There's a lot of different ways to numb out in the world. You can numb out on just being super thrilled with all the stuff you have, or whatever your hobby is. It can connect you with people, but it can also be a safe place that just involves sort of just going through the same motions where you're not really growing or changing as a person. So yeah, so I hear you on that, and I think that's a good insight about. And who knows? Other people might not get that, but that's just a theory that comes back to me a lot. It's a thought that comes back to me a lot, is that anybody can get stuck, and it's important to sort of bear that in mind. If you're not, then they're a lot more likely to be the person who's not changing, I guess, would be my thought. Yeah, okay. Interesting. So I'm going to go back to something that we talked about a little bit. Is there any other, like, As a reporter, I know that you tell these stories, you go around the community, you meet people, that sort of thing. And I know that in some way those are featured, and I don't know, I would assume that this is public because it gets broadcast publicly. This isn't like
Yeah.
anything secretive or but I'm curious if there are more stories about sort of other people that have inspired you, who you've met in the community in your journeys and travels and what you've covered as a reporter.
I think one of them I did recently. It was grieving over the holidays. I actually have this story on my LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I met this woman who is in charge of the Modern Widows Club. She founded the nonprofit organization. And she lost her husband due to a car crash at such a young age. And she had two little girls. And I lost my mother unexpectedly in 2025. So I was going through the holidays and what story can I put out there? Food banks, excuse me, are great. Clothing
Sure,
drives are great. Writing a
sure.
check for a family who needs it is great. But one of the things that I was thinking in my head is like, people are going to be going into this Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year season without having a loved one. And I met her and also met other people too, and it just inspired me to tell the story. I was like, wow, let me tell this story because I know a lot of people are going to want to know how they can celebrate the holidays without their loved ones. So I talked with her, and ever since then, like, she just stuck to me. And it helped me go through my first Christmas, my first Thanksgiving without my mother. And, we did little things to honor her. My mom always did new board games for us. It could be just the weirdest game
Hmm.
ever, but that's how she did with me and my sisters every single year. She would gift us that. So we continue the tradition. So doing that story helped me, and I saw it helped a lot of other people too. I didn't realize a lot of people watched it until I looked on my LinkedIn, until I looked at my Facebook DMs, Instagram, like DMs, social media. Everyone's like, "Thank you so much for doing this story. I didn't realize how much I needed this." And they were telling me
Yeah.
there's them losing a loved one. I know one person lost their 5-year-old son to leukemia this past year. So it's really big, and it goes back to what I was saying. We have so much more in common with people that we probably don't even know than we do with our differences. So
Sure.
doing that story definitely, and meeting her and other people I interviewed in that story definitely inspired me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting just to think about what does support look like through that organization based on the story that you did or the, research and meeting the founder, that sort of thing. Because I think about, we're talking about in-person connection and grieving feels like it's sort of a private thing. Is there a public showing of that, or is that more like what's that look like? I wasn't there for the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Modern Widows Club does is a group of women who are widows. It ranges from 21 years old to like 80 something, 90 something years old. She told me, I forgot the statistic, but it was very alarming. I think it was like 1 in 7 women are widows in the United States. And I didn't know that either. And it's
Yeah,
not
that's
talked about ever. It's not talked about, or even widowers. It's never talked about losing a loved one.
sure. Yeah,
And whenever you think of grieving, it can be private, but I have noticed if I've grieved with other people who have experienced the same thing I did, it doesn't go away, but it becomes more manageable. And I know the Modern Widows Club, in speaking with the founder, she was telling me how it's just like you said, it's a community of women who are going through the same thing. They do gatherings together, they do conferences together, and I thought it was such a beautiful thing. I think she has, I want to say, hundreds of members, and it's very very phenomenal where it was just one woman who was looking for that community for herself, and she decided to build it. And now these women who are freshly widowed or have been widowed for years can, relate to one another, be there for one another, hug and cry with one another, share memories with one another. And just like you said, it's just that community, which is super cool as well.
yeah, very cool. Is that so is that a local organization? Or is that national? I mean, 100 sounds like local if I'm guessing, but I don't know if that's correct.
Let me double check. I believe it is nationally recognized. I just
Okay.
know it's based
Well,
in
that's
Central
okay.
Florida.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, that's we don't I don't want you to feel like you have to look it up. But yeah, okay. No, that's cool. Okay, interesting. Yeah, 1 in 7 people, 1 in 7 women is a widow. Wow, that's yeah, that is surprising, isn't it? Interesting. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm glad that community's out there for them for sure. Anything more uh I guess upbeat. I don't want to take away from grief, but at the same time, you mentioned pickleball, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I'm interested in, you know, I I guess what I would say is I don't want to spend all of our time talking about 100 different communities that you've come into, but we've talked about pickleball, we've talked about the widows group, maybe one other community that you've come across. What have you, as a reporter, done work to feature, to highlight that other people are doing in terms of community?
I believe it's just like, food drives. I remember the
Hmm.
when the SNAP benefits during the government shutdown last year.
Sure, yeah.
A lot of people, all hands on deck, Second Harvest, churches, people doing it outside their garages, doing food banks and food pantries, all this stuff.
Sure, yeah.
People collecting like snacks for kids and stuff. I think seeing everyone just come together doing that and they're, helping literally perfect strangers. And perfect strangers are receiving help from strangers. So that's another community that was able to cover. I believe it was over a month. Unfortunately, the government shutdown happened,
Sure, yeah.
but I covered that for over a month, and it put in perspective that even if you could do so much with so little, if you just
Hmm.
give, being a
Hmm.
giver's heart more than a receiving heart. Even if you don't
Hmm.
have much to give it anyways. So that's what I saw the community doing during that time with food banks and help making sure people were able to put food on the table for their kids, for their family, and for everybody.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been involved in food drives as a young person and as an older person, of course. Yeah, for sure, it's good to give back to the community. I think, what are the ways you mentioned a little bit earlier that people they sometimes they recognize you when you're out in public from the news and that sort of thing. Obviously, there's always an imbalance of people who want to be featured on the news for because everybody's out there making their own story. There's billions of us. Then there's the however many get mentioned or have their story told on the news. Tell me a little about what that's like in the sense of um, how do you sort of sift through all of that, or what's the ratio? You know what I mean? It's like for every one story, how many don't quite make the cut? Is it 1,000? Is it 1 million? I mean, I don't think it's 1 million, but well, I don't know. I'm not a reporter, so maybe I should let you tell me.
It's kind of a lot because we strive to have just real people in our stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, someone who is being impacted by a certain issue and everything. But the amount of people who don't want to be on camera to share their issue is like 85% of the time. It is very hard to put somebody on camera at the time because honestly, if it were
Interesting.
me and I was being interviewed about an issue, I wouldn't want to show my face on TV.
Sure,
So
sure,
I try to
sure.
relate to them, but then I talk to them and say, look, it feels uncomfortable, but imagine how many people you could be helping by showing that you're going through this or going through this issue, or you could be that voice where people could relate to, and this could give them encouragement to say, hey, let me talk to my elected officials, or hey, let me talk to this food bank, or hey,
Mm-hmm.
let me talk to this person about what I'm going through and get help. So whenever I talk to them about that, that's when I see a shift in their mind a little bit and say, okay, I can definitely do this. And then I just have a conversation with them. I try not to. I know there's this thing called a reporter voice. I don't think I have a reporter voice. I think my voice is kind of high. I'm working on it, honestly. But I just talk to
Your
them.
voice is sorry. Let's spend more time there. You said your voice is kind of high, and so I don't know what a reporter voice is personally. That's low voice. Is that what you're saying?
No, it just sounds more mature. And I feel like I sound like a child on television sometimes.
Oh, I see. I see.
I
Okay.
don't know. Not saying it's a low, like it sounds more
Got it.
mature. Me, I
Got
just
it.
haven't found it yet, I guess you can say. From my last market to this one, it has changed a little bit,
Hmm.
but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's probably just me
That's
getting in
funny.
my own head. But everyone tells me it's fine. But then I look back and look at my stories. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, I guess every trade has its unique quirks, so thinking
Mhm.
about how your voice presents is certainly makes sense as a reporter that that would be on your mind. I don't probably think enough about that, but yeah, I'm just a regular person who just decided to do a podcast about people and IRL connection, so but yeah, anyway. So let's see. I think like, what does it look like then if somebody, I feel like, I don't spend a lot of time talking to reporters and, so my curiosity really has me. And so when I say that, what I'm thinking about is the fact that there are certain people so you mentioned 85% of people don't even want to be featured or on camera. So that's interesting. You would think that people would want to have their story heard, but I guess a lot of times, sometimes you have to cover things like tragedy, where of course, you don't necessarily want to be featured on the news for something horrible that happened to you, which I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if for a
And it
moment we
really
just
depends. It depends on where you are too. Like I know for me, it's a bit harder to get more people on camera because I just got here and people are just getting to know me. So we call it MOS, like man on the street interviews. Those are a little bit kind of easier for me. But oftentimes some people are kind of shy. So you do want to give them grace and be like, hey, like this person doesn't owe me anything, but if they do want their story to be featured, like I'm here. I got my
sure.
camera, I got my microphone. I tell me your story. So it really depends. It depends on each reporter, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so where I was gonna go with it was just to say if we eliminate the part and we just ignore for a moment the tragedy or whatever people have justifiable reason for not wanting to be, I don't want to be on television because my house got washed away in a flood or whatever. But the people who are doing something where whatever they're building, whether that's a community, a business, like whatever it is, they would like to be featured. What's that like in the sense that when I said I don't talk to a lot of reporters, what I was thinking of is like, I bet people would be curious, like, what does it look like for the stars to align to have your thing featured? What are some of the common criteria or things that you're looking for?
I think just seeing a person's passion in what they're doing will make the story speak for itself. I have interviewed people in the past where they're probably opening up a business or they're doing like a nonprofit, and I could tell when it could sometimes feel like a chore to be featured for them and they really don't want to do it. But people who have a passion to build that community, to build that business, to help people, the story definitely speaks for itself. And it even makes me feel good too, because I'm like, this is a person that has worked so hard to do something that they love or build something to help other people. And all they want to do is just to spread the word to help even more people who are either struggling or going through with something or want that community. So it definitely does make the story speak for itself whenever a person has a passion behind what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I think it's almost just sort of the natural way of things in a sense. And what I mean when I say that is the people who really have that passion, their story tends to rise to the top in whatever outlet it is, whether it's the news or whether it's social media, all kinds of different ways. I think that's very human, isn't it? To think that in general, there's always exceptions. There are people who are very, very good at lying and they might be able to present something as being their passion when it's not. But for the most part, people's humanity kind of shows through that, doesn't it? Meaning that, like, it's really hard to hide whether you truly are excited or not, or passionate or not. So what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
No. Yeah, interesting. Cool. Well, I think in my mind, I like to I have my own curiosities and questions, things that we sort of dig into in these episodes, but I always leave a bit at the end for folks to share. If you had the mic, if you were the reporter, imagine that. What are the things that you want to share about yourself, about your work, about maybe a particular community or cause or something like that. Anything that we didn't cover that you feel like you'd like to share with the audience.
Mhm. I think at the end of the day, My goal is to help people. I feel like
Hmm.
we live in an age where there's a lot of selfishness instead of selflessness.
Sure.
We do things to do them for ourselves, like, which is totally fine. Take care of yourself, like, do things for
Hmm.
yourself. But at the end of the day, I feel like our sole purpose in this life is to serve other people. And I feel like if we had more willing to serve other people, and like we've been talking this whole time, building community to serve other people, I feel like we would be in a lot better place than we are right now in society. And, I pray about it every single day. I strive to serve other people, help other people. And some days I may fail. Some days I might be more selfish than other days.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's like my goal till the day I die is to help as many people as possible, even if it's like, serving my husband to be a good wife, serving my family to be a great daughter, a great sister, a great aunt, serving to be a great friend. I mean, I love being a friend, or even just being a person that someone needs to talk to. I want to be that person that people could look to and could be confident to tell me, like, maybe their deepest, darkest secrets, or like,
Sure.
what they're struggling with. Come to me if they need prayer, or come to me if they want to come over for a meal. That's my sole purpose in life, and I really hope and pray that more people would have that, that passion, is not as much as I do, but for possibly have that passion to serve others as well. So, but one day at a time.
Yeah.
That's all I tell myself. So,
Yeah, and it's not a competition, so I mean everybody has their own sort of like way in life. But I think it's interesting because this really touches on something that is I could go really far down this rabbit hole, but I'll indulge a little bit and just share some thoughts on this. I think that um if you look at, you know, 75 years ago, 50 years ago, something like that, um maybe more like 60 years ago, it was very common. Duty and a sense of obligation was a really big theme, at least in American culture and society. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the burden of, helping others and making a sacrifice. Because I think that it's interesting because right in the middle, sort of between the two, I was very compelled by the movie The Matrix when it came out when I was like, 20 or whatever in 1999. Well, I guess I would have been 18 or something like that in 1999. Anyway, the reason I mention that is just to say that for a long time that seemed like science fiction. But more and more, it's becoming a reality where we have these different contexts in which we live that are isolated, whether that's like we talked about social media, where all of your connection is virtual, whether that's working with people. I work remote, and so I don't see the people face to face whom I work with every day. And I think as that happens, and especially with AI and the potential of, Elon Musk said this thing that was like horrifying to me. He was talking about the future of AI, or like cell phones would be just like a portal into, like, it's not really a computer anymore. It's just kind of like video that sort of generates itself based on whatever you're thinking or want to see or whatever. And I'm like, man, that's like a horrible, really horrible future, because it's so, to your point about that dichotomy, right? Talking about helping other people versus, getting ahead ourselves or satisfying whatever urge we have. We talk about doom scrolling, we talk about all this kind of stuff. And I think that's the ultimate danger, right? Is that we end up living in a little pod consuming a universe doesn't even exist, and we don't even realize that we're not actually connecting with other people because you're hallucinating the idea that you're connecting with other people. So anyway, it's a dark future, and I sense that it won't. Things never happen quite the way you think, but you made me think about that. When you talked about the idea of helping other people or being of service, I think that's less of a theme these days than it used to be.
right.
It used to be kind of a guiding light for society in general, at least in America. It was pretty often repeated. Yeah. Man, well, thanks for sharing that thought. And I don't want to be the one who sort of brings us to a close. So any further thoughts down that sort of really wild tangent that I just kind of opened up for no reason?
I think at the end of the day, We're all responsible for the change that we want to see. If we want to build more
Mm-hmm.
communities, step out of that comfort zone to build that community, even if it's just one person, or even you can even start with your family. Like if you don't see your
Mm-hmm.
family as often, start
Sure,
a
yeah.
weekly FaceTime call with your family, like talking about, hey, like this
Mm-hmm.
is what happened at work this week, or hey, I got a promotion, or hey, that's one way you can start. But I think just keeping in mind, be selfless. Building a community is not going to happen overnight, and be the change that you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
I know we always hear the be the change you want to see, but you got to step out of your comfort zone in order to see that change. So, it's baby steps for sure.
All right, Ashley. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I really love your perspective. I love that you have this interest in serving other people, and that you're doing that both with your work as a reporter and just in other ways that you talked about and shared about your faith. So thanks for sharing all that today. And yeah, I hope that it serves as an inspiration to folks in terms of wanting to get out of the house, wanting to get out of that sort of that prison cell of the virtual world that we're all kind of consciously trying to escape from. So thanks so much for joining me, and I will let folks know about how that where they can find you, see on the news. We'll include some links and to your various places to find you. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Brian, for having me. I had such a fun time.
Awesome. Cool. Until next time.